I'm Morgan Taylor, 34, standing frozen outside Bella Rosa restaurant, staring at a $3.270 bill in my trembling hands, while my sister's words echo in my mind. You're not really family anyway. Go find another table. 20 years of believing I belonged shattered in an instant over appetizers and champagne. What my family didn't know was that I had just become the new majority shareholder of our family business that morning, and their little dinner celebration was about to become the beginning of their downfall. Hey everyone, before I dive into this absolute roller coaster of family drama, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below. If you're new here and enjoy real-life family revenge stories, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of my upcoming videos. This story about how my perfect family showed their true colors might just be the most shocking one yet. Trust me, you'll want to see how karma came back around in the end. Now let's get back to that fateful night at Bella Rosa. Growing up as Morgan Taylor in the affluent suburb of Westlake, Connecticut, I had everything a child could ask for, at least on the surface. The Taylors were respected throughout the community. My adoptive father, Richard, was a self-made businessman who had built Taylor Enterprises from nothing into a multi-million-dollar technology consultancy firm. My adoptive mother, Eleanor, served on several charity boards and was known for her immaculate garden parties. And then there was my sister Vanessa, 2 years older, biologically their daughter, and the golden child who could do no wrong. I learned I was adopted when I was 8 years old, not from my parents but from Vanessa during one of our arguments. "You're not even really my sister," she had spat at me. When I ran crying to my parents, they confirmed it was true, but assured me that I was chosen special and just as much a part of the family as Vanessa. I wanted desperately to believe them. Throughout our childhood, the differences in how we were treated were subtle but undeniable. Vanessa's ballet recitals warranted professional photographers, while my soccer games were often missed due to important business meetings. Vanessa's academic achievements were celebrated with dinner parties, while my art contest wins received polite nods. I told myself they were just more connected to Vanessa's interests than mine, that it wasn't because she was their biological child. I worked twice as hard to earn their approval, graduating at the top of my class and earning a full scholarship to NYU, while Vanessa struggled through a business degree at her father's alma mater. After college, I built my own career in digital marketing, determined to succeed without riding on the Taylor name, while Vanessa was immediately given a director position at Taylor Enterprises, despite her mediocre skills. Despite all this, I maintained the family relationship, calling weekly, attending all holidays and celebrations, always bringing thoughtful gifts, and keeping the peace. I had convinced myself that blood didn't matter, that our family bond transcended biology. My relationship with Vanessa had improved somewhat in adulthood, or so I thought. We'd meet for occasional brunches, exchange birthday presents, and text about TV shows we both watched. The passive-aggressive comments had decreased, and I interpreted that as growth. I believed we had moved past our childhood rivalry. Richard had always promised that Taylor Enterprises would be left equally to both daughters. "You're both Taylors," he would say during family meetings about the business. "And Taylors take care of their own." I had no reason to doubt him, especially since I had started consulting for the company 3 years ago, bringing in several major clients through my marketing expertise. The cracks in our family facade began to show when Richard had a minor heart attack last year. During his recovery, I noticed hushed conversations between him, Eleanor, and Vanessa that would stop when I entered the room. Documents would be quickly shuffled away and there were company meetings I wasn't invited to. I brushed off my concerns, telling myself I was being paranoid and that they were just trying to spare me the stress of business matters while I was already juggling my consulting work and helping with Richard's care. How naive I was. How desperate to believe in the family I thought I had. 2 days before the infamous dinner at Bella Rosa, Richard's longtime assistant Margaret called me. She had been with the company for over 30 years and had watched both Vanessa and me grow up. "Morgan," she said, her voice uncharacteristically serious. "There's something you need to see. Can you come to my house tonight? Don't tell your family." That night over tea in Margaret's cozy living room, she handed me a folder. "I've always thought of you as the daughter I never had," she said. "And I can't stand by and watch this happen to you." Inside the folder were copies of new company documents showing that Richard had quietly restructured his will and the company ownership. Instead of the promised 50/50 split, Vanessa was to receive 95% of the shares with me, getting a token 5% and a small cash payout that was a fraction of the company's worth. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "There's more," Margaret said, pulling out another document. It was an email exchange between Richard and the company's lawyer, where Richard explicitly stated, "Morgan has been a useful marketing resource, but ultimately, blood comes first. Vanessa may not have Morgan's business instincts, but she's my daughter, and Taylor Enterprises needs to remain in true Taylor hands." True Taylor hands. After 26 years of being told I was just as much a Taylor as any of them, here was proof of what I had always feared deep down. I would never truly be family. I drove home in a day's tears blurring my vision. That night I barely slept, cycling through hurt anger and a sense of betrayal so profound it felt physical. By morning, however, a cold determination had replaced my anguish. If I wasn't really family, then I was freed from family obligations, including loyalty to people who clearly had none for me. The morning after my devastating discovery, I received a call from Benjamin Clark, the company's elderly legal counsel who had been with Taylor Enterprises since its inception. "Morgan, I need to see you immediately," he said, his voice tight with urgency. "Not at the office. Meet me at Riverside Park, the bench near the old oak tree in 1 hour." Confused and still reeling from the previous night's revelation, I almost declined. But curiosity won out, and exactly 1 hour later, I found myself sitting beside Benjamin on a park bench watching joggers pass by. "I've known your father Richard for 40 years, Benjamin began without preamble. "And I've watched you grow into a remarkable woman who deserves better than what's happening." He handed me a sealed envelope. "What I'm about to tell you could cost me my job, but at my age, retirement is overdue anyway." Inside the envelope was a document detailing the ownership structure of Taylor Enterprises, but this wasn't the same information Margaret had shown me. According to these papers, Walter Simmons, Richard's college roommate and silent partner from the very beginning, owned 42% of the company shares. "Walter died last week," Benjamin said quietly. "No wife, no children. Just a nephew he barely knew and—" He paused, looking at me intently. "You?" "Me," I whispered. "But I barely knew Mr. Simmons. He was just Dad's friend who came to Christmas dinners sometimes." Benjamin smiled. "Walter knew you though. He watched how hard you worked, how you never relied on the Taylor name to succeed. He saw how you were treated differently too. Walter's wife couldn't have children, which is why he never had a family of his own. But he always said you reminded him of what his daughter might have been like." My mind was spinning. "What are you saying exactly? Walter left his entire 42% stake in Taylor Enterprises to you." "The paperwork was finalized this morning." Benjamin handed me another document. "Walter's will. Your father doesn't know yet. Nobody does, except me, and now you." I stared at the paper, unable to process the information. "This makes me the majority shareholder," Benjamin confirmed. "Richard owns 35%, Eleanor 15%, and Vanessa has been gifted 3% over the years. With Walter's 42%, you now control the company." The irony wasn't lost on me. After years of being treated as less than, of being promised equal treatment only to discover I was being marginalized, I now held more power than any of them. "There's a family dinner tonight at Bella Rosa to celebrate the company's quarterly results, isn't there?" Benjamin asked, a knowing look in his eyes. I nodded, my mind already racing with possibilities. They're planning to announce the new ownership structure after dinner, Benjamin continued. Richard will present Vanessa as the future CEO and majority owner. He's invited all the board members and key investors. Does Richard know about Walter's will? I asked. Not yet. The official reading is scheduled for tomorrow morning. Tonight they still think everything is going according to their plan. As I left the park, clutching the documents that changed everything, I felt a strange calm replace my hurt. For once, I had the upper hand. The question was, what would I do with it? I spent the afternoon strategizing. I called several board members I had good relationships with, arranging private meetings for the next day. I contacted the company's financial director, an ally who had always appreciated my contributions more than Richard did, and I prepared myself mentally for what would be the most significant confrontation of my life. As the hour of the dinner approached, I dressed with particular care, a sharp charcoal gray suit that projected authority paired with my grandmother's pearl necklace, the only inheritance I had from my biological family. I wasn't going to Bella Rosa just for a family dinner. I was going to reclaim my worth. What I didn't anticipate was that the evening would spiral into something far uglier than I had imagined. I had prepared for a professional confrontation about business ownership, not a personal attack on my very identity as a family member. As I drove to the restaurant, I rehearsed what I would say when Richard made his announcement. I planned to wait until he finished, then calmly present the truth. I wouldn't be cruel or vengeful, I would be businesslike. Professional. Everything they had taught me to be. Little did I know that the night would veer so drastically from my carefully laid plans, pushing me toward a reckoning none of us were prepared for, least of all Vanessa, who had no idea that her moment of cruelty would trigger consequences she could never have anticipated. Bella Rosa was the pinnacle of fine dining in our city, a Michelin-starred Italian restaurant where reservations were needed months in advance. Unless you were Richard Taylor, whose business had provided their reservation system for free. The private dining room was adorned with fresh flowers and soft candlelight, creating an atmosphere of understated luxury that matched the Taylor family image. I arrived precisely on time, taking a deep breath before entering what felt like a battlefield disguised as a celebration. The room was already half full, board members in expensive suits, key investors sipping cocktails, and of course my family, Richard commanding attention at the head of the table, Eleanor perfectly coiffed beside him and Vanessa glowing in a designer dress, clearly anticipating her crowning moment. Morgan, darling, you made it. Eleanor air-kissed both my cheeks, her perfume cloying and her smile not quite reaching her eyes. Had that smile always been so empty, or was I only seeing it clearly now? Wouldn't miss it, I replied, matching her tone. Big night for the company. Richard clapped me on the shoulder, the gesture both proprietary and dismissive. That marketing campaign of yours is part of what we're celebrating. Numbers are through the roof this quarter. My campaign had increased revenue by 37%, but I just nodded. This wasn't the moment yet. I took my assigned seat beside Walter Simmons's nephew, a quiet man who seemed uncomfortable in the opulent surroundings. I'm Morgan, I introduced myself. Stephen, he replied. Walter's nephew. I don't really belong here, but the lawyer said I should come. He had no idea that I now owned what his uncle had left behind, and I saw no reason to enlighten him yet. The first course arrived. Imported burrata with heirloom tomatoes, along with premium champagne. Richard stood raising his glass. To Taylor Enterprises, to family, and to the exciting new chapter we're about to begin. The meal progressed through truffle risotto and aged ribeye, each course more extravagant than the last. Throughout dinner I noticed Vanessa whispering to Eleanor, both of them glancing at me with expressions I couldn't quite decipher. The tension in the room was palpable, at least to me, though the other guests seemed oblivious, enjoying the lavish meal and flowing alcohol. Just as dessert was about to be served, Richard cleared his throat. This was it, the announcement I'd been waiting for. I straightened in my chair, preparing myself. Before we conclude this wonderful evening, I have a special announcement to make. Richard began, his voice carrying the practiced authority of a man used to being listened to. Taylor Enterprises has been my life's work, built from nothing into what it is today. And nothing is more important than knowing it will continue to thrive after I step back. He gestured toward Vanessa, who beamed with anticipation. That's why I'm proud to announce that my daughter Vanessa will be taking over as CEO effective next month, supported by her new position as majority shareholder. Polite applause filled the room. I maintained a neutral expression, waiting for my moment. Blood is thicker than water, Richard continued, and keeping the company in true Taylor hands has always been my priority. Something in his phrasing, so similar to the email I'd seen, made me flinch visibly. Vanessa noticed and smirked clearly, enjoying what she thought was my disappointment. Before Richard could continue, Vanessa stood, champagne flute in hand. I just want to say how honored I am to carry on the Taylor legacy, she said, her voice syrupy with false humility. This company represents our family's values, our family's name, our family's blood. Her eyes found mine, a challenge in them. Some of us understand what family truly means. What loyalty and belonging really are. The room had gone uncomfortably quiet. Even Richard looked taken aback by Vanessa's obvious jab. I could have let it go. I could have waited for Richard to finish, then calmly presented the facts about Walter's will. That had been my plan. But something in Vanessa's smug expression, in the years of subtle and not so subtle reminders that I wasn't really a Taylor, pushed me to my feet. What exactly are you implying, Vanessa? I asked, my voice steady despite the anger coursing through me. She laughed, a tinkling sound entirely devoid of warmth. Oh, nothing. Just that some of us were born Taylors and some of us were charity cases. Eleanor gasped. Vanessa, that's enough. But Vanessa, emboldened by what she thought was her impending coronation and several glasses of champagne, wasn't finished. What? We're all thinking it. Dad's giving the company to his real daughter. The one who shares his DNA. The one who belongs. The room had gone deathly silent. Every eye was on us, witnessing the ugly truth behind the Taylor family facade cracking wide open. Morgan has been valuable to the company, Richard interjected, trying to salvage the situation. She'll be well compensated and remain an important consultant. Stop, I said quietly, but with enough force that Richard actually fell silent. Just stop pretending. I know about the will, about the 5% token shares, while Vanessa gets everything else. I know about your email saying the company needs to remain in true Taylor hands. Richard paled. How did you? It doesn't matter, I cut him off. What matters is that for 26 years you told me I was just as much your daughter as Vanessa. That blood didn't define family. That was a lie. Vanessa rolled her eyes dramatically. Oh please, are we really doing this now? The adopted daughter's sob story. This dinner is to celebrate my new position, not indulge your identity crisis. That's when she said it. The words that would change everything. You know what, Morgan? If you're so upset about finally facing reality, maybe you should go find another table. You're not really family anyway. A collective gasp went around the table. Even Richard and Eleanor looked mortified. Vanessa, Eleanor hissed. Apologize this instant, but Vanessa, riding high on what she thought was her moment of triumph, simply laughed and turned to the waiter. Actually, you know what would be perfect? Separate checks. Family at this table, she gestured to herself, Richard and Eleanor and others can pay for themselves. The waiter, clearly uncomfortable, looked to Richard for guidance. Richard, to his credit, looked appalled. Of course not. This is a company dinner. It's all on one check. Actually, I said, finding my voice again, separate checks sound perfect. In fact, since this dinner was to celebrate the company's performance under the new marketing campaign, my campaign, perhaps the company should cover my meal as well. I turned to leave dignity intact when Vanessa called after me. "Running away again, Morgan. That's what you do, isn't it? When things get hard, you retreat to your little apartment and your little life, and pretend you don't desperately wish you were really one of us." I paused, then turned back slowly. "Vanessa, I've spent my entire life trying to be one of you. Tonight, I'm finally seeing clearly that I never want to be anything like you again." As I walked out, I heard Richard calling my name, but I didn't stop. I was done performing the role of grateful adopted daughter. Done pretending that the 1,000 paper cuts of exclusion didn't bleed. I was almost to my car when a server chased after me, breathless. Miss Taylor, your sister said you'd be covering your portion of the dinner separately." He handed me a bill. "The gentleman at your table had the Wagyu and the 1,982 Bordeaux." I looked down at the paper in my hand. $3.270. Vanessa had managed to stick me with one of the largest bills, including the expensive wine Stephen had ordered, thinking it was covered by the company. Standing there in the parking lot, staring at that ridiculous sum, something crystallized within me. This wasn't just about money. This was about 26 years of being made to feel like I should be grateful for scraps of affection, for the privilege of carrying a name that, according to them, wasn't really mine. I thought about the documents in my bag, about the fact that I now controlled 42% of Taylor Enterprises. They didn't know it yet, but tomorrow morning everything would change. This $3.270 bill wasn't an ending. It was just the beginning of my response. I didn't sleep that night. How could I? After paying the outrageous bill with my credit card, the one I kept for emergencies, I drove home in a state of shock that gradually gave way to cold, clear anger. Not the hot, destructive kind that makes you do something you'll regret, but the icy, calculated variety that sharpens your focus to a razor's edge. By dawn, I had formulated a plan. I wouldn't lash out emotionally. I would respond strategically. The 42% ownership of Taylor Enterprises that Walter had left me wasn't just an asset, it was leverage, a means to finally claim the respect I'd been denied for so long. My phone had been buzzing all night with texts and calls from Richard and Eleanor, ranging from concerned, to placating, to angry. None from Vanessa, of course. I ignored them all, let them stew in the aftermath of their true feelings being exposed. At 8:30 a.m. sharp, I walked into Benjamin Clark's office for the official reading of Walter Simmons's will. Richard was already there, looking haggard as if he hadn't slept either. Eleanor sat beside him, her perfect facade showing cracks in the form of smudged mascara and a slightly askew blouse collar. Vanessa was notably absent. "Morgan," Richard began, "as soon as I entered about last night," I held up a hand, cutting him off. "We're here for the will reading. Nothing else needs to be discussed right now." Benjamin cleared his throat, uncomfortable with the tension but professional as always. "Let's proceed, shall we? We're just waiting for Stephen Simmons, Walter's nephew." When Stephen arrived, Benjamin began reading the will. I watched Richard's face carefully as Benjamin got to the crucial part. "To Morgan Taylor, whom I have watched grow into an exceptional woman of integrity and talent, I leave my entire 42% ownership stake in Taylor Enterprises, with full voting rights and privileges therein." Richard's face drained of color. Eleanor gasped audibly. Stephen looked confused but not particularly bothered. He'd barely known his uncle and had expected nothing. This can't be right," Richard stammered. "Walter and I had an agreement." "The agreement," Benjamin interrupted gently, "was that his shares would pass to family upon his death. He considered Morgan family even if some others might not." The barb landed exactly where intended. Richard flinched. "This makes Morgan the majority shareholder." Benjamin continued, addressing the room but looking pointedly at Richard. "With 42% ownership compared to Richard's 35%, Eleanor's 15%, and Vanessa's 3%. "I'll contest it," Richard said, immediately desperation edging into his voice. Walter wasn't in his right mind. He was ill. He was perfectly lucid, Benjamin countered. The will was updated 6 months ago, witnessed by 2 doctors and a notary. It's ironclad, Richard. I finally spoke, my voice steady. I'd like to call an emergency board meeting for noon today. As majority shareholder, that's my right. Richard stared at me, seeing me, truly seeing me. Perhaps for the first time. Not as his adopted daughter, not as a convenient marketing resource, but as the woman who now controlled his life's work. The board meeting was set for noon at the company headquarters. I arrived early, taking a seat at the head of the table, Richard's usual place. One by one, the board members filed in, confusion evident on their faces. The events of the previous night's dinner had already circulated, and now this emergency meeting called by me, rather than Richard, had them completely off balance. Richard, Eleanor and Vanessa entered last. Vanessa looked like she'd been crying, her first sign of vulnerability that I could remember seeing since we were children. "What is this about, Morgan?" one of the older board members asked. "Richard says you've called this meeting, but he's not clear on why." "I'll explain everything," I assured him. "But first, I should inform everyone that as of this morning, I am the majority shareholder of Taylor Enterprises, with 42% ownership." The room erupted in murmurs. Vanessa's face contorted with shock and fury. "That's impossible," she burst out. "Dad, tell her that's impossible." Richard, looking defeated, said nothing. I outlined the facts, calmly explaining Walter's bequest and what it meant for the company's leadership structure. Then I paused, taking in the stunned faces around me. "I know this comes as a shock to everyone. It certainly did to me. 24 hours ago I discovered that despite years of promises that I was equal family, Richard had planned to leave 95% of the company to Vanessa, with just 5% to me." Uncomfortable glances were exchanged. Several board members looked away, which told me they'd known about this plan. Then, last night at dinner, after working tirelessly for this company, bringing in major clients and increasing revenue by 37% with my last campaign, I was told by Vanessa, in front of all of you, that I wasn't really family, that I should find another table, and then was stuck with a $3.270 dinner bill as a final insult. I let that sink in, watching guilt and embarrassment wash over several faces. "But here's what's going to happen now," I continued. "I'm not going to do what was done to me. I'm not going to use my position to exclude or demean others." I turned to look directly at Richard. "Taylor Enterprises will remain exactly that, an enterprise run by Taylors. But from now on, actions and abilities will matter more than DNA." Everyone in the room knew what I was alluding to. Vanessa had been promoted based on her last name, not her capabilities, while I had earned my place through results. I'm proposing a restructuring of leadership based on merit, with quarterly performance reviews for all directors, including family members. The nepotism ends today. Richard finally found his voice. "You can't just come in and change everything overnight. You may have the shares, but you don't have the experience." "I have more relevant experience than Vanessa," I replied evenly. "And unlike either of you, I've worked outside this company. I know how the real world operates beyond the bubble of Taylor privilege." Looking around at all of you watching, I can see some of you nodding. You know exactly what it's like to be underestimated, to work twice as hard for half the recognition. That moment when I stood up for myself in that boardroom was terrifying, but also incredibly liberating. Have you ever had to confront family members who've treated you unfairly? Drop it in the comments below. Sometimes sharing these experiences helps us all feel less alone. And if you're enjoying this story about family karma and justice served, hit that like button. We're just getting to the turning point, and trust me, you'll want to see how this all unfolds. Now back to that tense boardroom. I'm calling for a vote of confidence in the current leadership I announced. As majority shareholder, I have that right. The vote was swift and decisive. The board members, many of whom had privately questioned Richard's decision to favor Vanessa despite her lackluster performance, sided with me. By the end of the meeting, I had been named interim CEO with a 6-month probationary period to prove myself. As the meeting adjourned, Vanessa rushed past me, tears streaming down her face. For a moment, I felt a pang of empathy. I knew how it felt to have your expectations shattered in an instant. But then I remembered the years of subtle cruelty, the dismissive comments, and finally her words at dinner. "You're not really family anyway." Richard and Eleanor approached me as the room cleared. "Morgan," Richard began, his voice uncharacteristically uncertain, "we need to talk. As a family." I looked at him steadily. "Do we have a family, Richard? Last night made it pretty clear where I stand." Eleanor reached for my hand, but I pulled away. "Morgan, darling, Vanessa was upset she'd had too much champagne. She didn't mean those horrible things." "Yes, she did," I replied quietly. "And so did you, Richard, when you wrote that email about keeping the company in true Taylor hands. You both meant it. The only difference is that Vanessa said it out loud." Richard had the decency to look ashamed. "I made a mistake. A terrible mistake. But you can't just take over like this. This company is my legacy. A legacy you were ready to deny me." I cut in. "But unlike you, I'm not excluding anyone based on biology. You're still on the board. Your shares are still valuable. I'm just ensuring that merit matters more than DNA around here from now on." As I walked away, I heard Eleanor call after me, "What about dinner on Sunday? Our usual family dinner?" I paused, then turned back. "I think I'll find another table." The devastation on her face gave me no pleasure. Despite everything, these people had raised me, had been my family for most of my life. But some bridges once burned can't be rebuilt the same way. Sometimes they need to be constructed anew, with stronger materials and better engineering. That night, alone in my apartment, I finally let myself cry. Not from sadness or anger, but from relief. The weight of constantly trying to prove I belonged, of silently accepting less than I deserved, had finally been lifted. For the first time in my adult life, I felt truly free to be exactly who I was. Morgan Taylor, CEO of Taylor Enterprises, a woman who had earned her place through talent and determination, not an accident of birth or adoption. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. I knew that. Families are complicated businesses, even more so. But for the first time, I was walking that road on my own terms, with my head held high, and no apologies for taking up the space I deserved. The weeks following my appointment as interim CEO were a whirlwind of activity. I moved into the corner office that had been Richard's for over 3 decades, replacing his dark mahogany furniture with lighter, more modern pieces. It wasn't just a stylistic choice, it was a statement. Taylor Enterprises was entering a new era. My first official act was to commission an independent audit of the company's operations, finances, and personnel practices. The results confirmed what I had long suspected: qualified employees had been consistently passed over for promotions in favor of Richard's golf buddies and their children. Departments headed by these nepotistic appointments were underperforming, while those led by merit-promoted managers showed significantly better results. Armed with this data, I implemented a company-wide restructuring based on performance metrics rather than personal connections. Some board members resisted initially, particularly those who had benefited from the old system, but the numbers spoke for themselves. By the end of the first month, we had a leaner, more efficient leadership team, still including several longtime Taylor loyalists, but now in positions that actually matched their skills. Richard attended the weekly board meetings, but said little. He looked older, diminished somehow, as if the loss of his absolute authority had physically affected him. Eleanor stopped coming to the office altogether, withdrawing from her ceremonial role as head of the company's charitable foundation. And Vanessa. Vanessa was the biggest surprise. 3 weeks after the infamous dinner, she appeared at my office door. Gone was the designer wardrobe and perfectly coiffed hair. Instead, she wore simple black pants and a white blouse, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "Do you have a minute?" she asked, her voice lacking its usual entitled edge. I gestured to the chair across from my desk, curious but guarded. Vanessa sat fidgeting with the strap of her sensible handbag. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began. "And talking. With a therapist, actually." That genuinely surprised me. Vanessa had always scoffed at therapy as something for weak people who can't handle reality. "She's helping me understand some things about myself, about why I've always been so competitive with you." She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. I was jealous, have been since we were kids. Jealous, I couldn't hide my incredulity. Of what? You had everything. Biological connection to our parents. The first pick of opportunities, automatic acceptance. Of your drive. Your talent, she replied softly. The fact that you could succeed on your own, without the Taylor name propping you up. I've always known I was mediocre, Morgan. Dad and Mom made sure I never had to face it, but I knew. Every time you excelled at something through sheer ability, while I got by on family connection, it made me hate you a little. And hate myself more. Her honesty left me momentarily speechless. "I'm not asking for my old job back," she continued. "I didn't deserve it. What I'm asking for is a chance to earn my place here just like anyone else would have to. No special treatment, no shortcuts. I want to start at the bottom and work my way up based on actual merit." "Why?" I asked, still skeptical. "Why now?" "Because you were right about everything," she admitted. "And because for the first time in my life I want to be proud of myself for real reasons, not manufactured ones." She paused, then added, "Also, my therapist says I need to make amends for my patterns of harmful behavior, and this seemed like a place to start." I considered her request carefully. The old Morgan might have jumped at this opportunity for reconciliation, so desperate for family approval that I'd overlook all the red flags. But I wasn't that person anymore. "I'll make you the same deal I'd make anyone with your qualifications," I finally said. 3-month trial period in the marketing department, not as director, as a coordinator, regular performance reviews. No special treatment, positive or negative. If you excel, you'll advance. If not, you'll be let go like anyone else would be. Relief washed over her face. "That's fair. More than fair." "And Vanessa," I added as she stood to leave, "this is a professional opportunity, not a personal reconciliation. What you said at that dinner, that doesn't just go away with one apology." She nodded, a flash of genuine regret in her eyes. "I understand. Thank you for the chance, Morgan. That's all I'm asking for right now." To everyone's surprise, especially mine, Vanessa threw herself into her new entry-level position with unexpected dedication. She arrived early, stayed late, asked thoughtful questions, and admitted when she didn't know something instead of bluffing her way through. Her colleagues, initially wary of the boss's sister, gradually came to appreciate her willingness to do the grunt work without complaint. Meanwhile, Richard and Eleanor maintained their distance both professionally and personally. The weekly family dinners that had been a tradition for years stopped entirely. Eleanor sent occasional texts checking in, but they felt performative, like she was going through the motions without any real connection. Christmas approached, the first one since the dramatic reshuffling of our family dynamic. I received a formal invitation to the Taylor family gathering, addressed to Morgan Taylor, CEO, which told me everything about how Richard still viewed our relationship. I declined politely, choosing instead to volunteer at a local shelter, serving meals to those who truly had no family to turn to. I was arranging desserts on a serving table when my phone buzzed with a text from Vanessa. "Miss you today. The house feels empty without you. I understand why you're not here, but if you change your mind, there's always a place for you." It was the first message from any of them that felt genuine, that acknowledged my absence as a loss, rather than an inconvenience or a rejection of their overture. I didn't change my mind about Christmas dinner, but I did send back a simple thank you. Merry Christmas. That small exchange marked the beginning of a slow, tentative rebuilding, not of the old family dynamic which had been irreparably damaged, but of something new, something with more honest foundations. By the 6-month mark of my tenure as CEO, Taylor Enterprises was thriving under the merit-based system I'd implemented. Quarterly profits were up 22%. Employee satisfaction scores had improved dramatically, and we'd acquired 2 smaller competitors that strengthened our market position. The board unanimously voted to remove the interim from my title, making me the permanent CEO. Even Richard abstained rather than voting against me, a tacit acknowledgement that my leadership was good for the company he had built. Vanessa had completed her 3-month trial period with flying colors. Her direct supervisor, who had no idea she was my sister when providing the evaluation, recommended her for promotion to junior manager, based on her exceptional performance and work ethic. "Are you sure you want to promote her so soon?" I asked the supervisor, careful not to let my personal history cloud my judgment. "I don't want anyone thinking it's favoritism." "With all due respect, Miss Taylor," he replied, "if she weren't your sister, I'd be making the same recommendation. She's the hardest worker on the team, her client retention rate is the highest in the department, and she's developed 2 campaign strategies that have outperformed projections by 30%. If anything, I think she's been working twice as hard because she's your sister." I approved the promotion, and Vanessa accepted it with a gratitude and humility that would have been unimaginable from the woman who had sneered at me across the table at Bella Rosa 6 months earlier. Meanwhile, Richard had withdrawn from daily operations entirely, though he retained his board seat. Eleanor had refocused her energy on her charitable work, now operating independently from Taylor Enterprises. We maintained a civil, distant relationship. Not hostile but not familiar either. Then 9 months after the dinner that changed everything, Richard suffered a major heart attack. I was in the middle of a presentation to our largest client, when Margaret, still my most trusted ally at the company, slipped me a note: "Richard in hospital. Critical condition. Eleanor asking for you." I excused myself, handed the presentation over to my COO, and drove directly to the hospital. In the waiting room, I found Eleanor looking smaller than I remembered her usually perfect appearance, disheveled from hours of anxious waiting. "Morgan," she breathed when she saw me, relief evident in her voice. "You came." "Of course I came," I replied, surprised that she would think otherwise. Despite everything, Richard had been my father for most of my life. "How is he? In surgery?" They said it's very serious." Her voice broke. "Vanessa is on her way from Chicago. She was there for that conference you sent her to." We sat together in awkward silence for several minutes before Eleanor spoke again. "I keep thinking about that dinner," she said quietly. "About how we hurt you. About all the times we must have hurt you without even realizing it." I said nothing, letting her continue. "Richard and we never meant to make you feel less than. We thought we were doing right by you, giving you a good home opportunities. But we were so focused on what we were giving, that we didn't see what we were withholding." She looked up at me, tears tracking down her lined face. "The truth is, Morgan, I've always been a little afraid of you." "Afraid of me?" I was genuinely perplexed. "You're so capable. So self-sufficient. From the time you were small, you figured things out on your own, solved your own problems. Vanessa always needed us, but you learned early not to need anyone." I thought about her words. It was true. I had learned self-sufficiency as a defense mechanism, a way to protect myself from disappointment. But that didn't excuse their behavior. "That doesn't justify treating me as less than family," I said finally. "No," she agreed. "It doesn't. Nothing does. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Morgan. I'm just trying to understand how we got here, so that maybe we can find a way forward. Richard may not get the chance to have this conversation with you. I needed to have it while I still could. Before I could respond, the surgeon appeared still in his scrubs. Richard had survived the surgery, but the next 48 hours would be critical. He was being moved to intensive care where only immediate family would be allowed to visit. The nurse at the ICU desk asked me my relationship to the patient. I'm his daughter, I said without hesitation. She nodded and allowed me in. Whether she noticed Eleanor's surprised expression or not, she gave no indication. Richard looked frail in the hospital bed connected to monitors and tubes, his skin ashen. I sat beside him, not touching him, but not leaving either. After a while, Eleanor went to get coffee, leaving us alone. I don't know if you can hear me, I said softly to his unconscious form. But I want you to know that the company is doing well. Better than ever, actually. And Vanessa. She's found her place, her real place based on what she can do, not who she is. I think you'd be proud of her. I know I am. I paused, gathering my thoughts. I'm not going to pretend the past didn't happen. You hurt me deeply and that can't be undone. But I'm not holding on to anger anymore. It's too heavy and I've carried it long enough. So I'm letting it go. Not for you but for me. I didn't know if my words penetrated his unconsciousness, but speaking them aloud released something in me. A final knot of resentment I hadn't even realized I was still harboring. Richard survived, though his recovery was slow. During those weeks of hospital visits and rehabilitation, a new dynamic began to form between us all. Not the old family pattern, which had been built on unequal foundation, but something more honest. Richard never explicitly apologized for the years of subtle favoritism, or for his plan to cut me out of my rightful share of the company. But he did something that for him was perhaps more meaningful. He deferred to my business judgment, sought my advice on his personal investments, and spoke of my leadership with genuine pride to his old business associates. Eleanor made more direct attempts at reconciliation, inviting me to lunch every few weeks, asking thoughtful questions about my life, and actually listening to the answers. We would never have the mother-daughter bond I had yearned for as a child, but we were building a relationship between equals that felt more authentic than what we'd had before. And Vanessa was the most transformed. Her therapist had helped her recognize her patterns of competitive jealousy, her insecurity masked as superiority. The humbling experience of starting over from the bottom had given her a new perspective on her own capabilities and on the value of earning respect rather than demanding it. One evening after we'd both worked late, she stopped by my office. "Remember that dinner at Bella Rosa?" she asked, leaning against the doorframe. "How could I forget?" I replied dryly. "I've been wanting to pay you back for that bill," she said, pulling an envelope from her bag. "It's taken me a while to save up, since I'm not getting the trust fund payments anymore, but it's all there. $3,270. I looked at the envelope but didn't take it. "Keep it. Consider it an expensive lesson for both of us." "I'd rather pay my debts," she insisted, placing the envelope on my desk. "The money, and the other debts too. The ones I can never fully repay." I studied her face, seeing the sincerity there. "Some debts can't be repaid with money, Vanessa. But they can be balanced with actions over time." She nodded, understanding. "I'm trying." I know, I acknowledged. "And it matters." As she turned to leave, I called after her. "Hey Vanessa, there's a new Italian place that opened downtown. Not as fancy as Bella Rosa, but the reviews are good. Would you want to grab dinner there sometime? My treat this time." The smile that spread across her face was genuine without a trace of the old smugness. "I'd like that. But let's split the check." 1 year to the day after the infamous Bella Rosa dinner, I found myself once again entering a restaurant for a milestone celebration. This time it was Salvatore's, a cozy Italian bistro downtown. and the occasion was the first anniversary of my official appointment as CEO. The past 12 months had seen Taylor Enterprises transform from a successful family business to a true industry leader. Our innovative approach to client services, combined with our newly transparent and merit-based corporate culture, had earned us features in Forbes and the Wall Street Journal. More importantly to me, our employee retention rate had skyrocketed, and the company had become known as one of the best places to work in our sector. I'd reserved a private dining room similar in size to the one at Bella Rosa, but warmer and less ostentatious. As I arrived, I saw that many of the guests were already there. Key employees, board members, and business partners who had been instrumental in our success. Richard and Eleanor were seated at a round table near the center of the room rather than at the head. Richard still moved slowly since his heart attack, but his color was good, and he was engaged in animated conversation with our new CTO, a brilliant woman I'd promoted from within. Vanessa was helping arrange name cards, making sure everyone would be seated next to people they'd enjoy talking with. She'd recently been promoted again to full manager of her department after consistently exceeding performance targets. The promotion had come with the full support of her team, who had gone from skeptical to loyal under her unexpectedly thoughtful leadership. As I made my way around the room, greeting people and accepting congratulations, I was struck by how different this gathering felt from that fateful night a year ago. There was warmth here, genuine connection, a sense that everyone present had earned their place at the table. When we were all seated and the first course had been served, I stood to offer a toast. The room quieted immediately, all eyes turning to me expectantly. A year ago, I learned a painful but valuable lesson about family. I learned that sharing a name doesn't automatically make you family. Actions do. Respect does. Seeing and valuing each other for who we truly are. That's what makes a family. I looked around the room at the faces of people who had supported me, challenged me, helped me grow as a leader and as a person. Some of you are related to me by adoption, some by professional ties, some by friendship that has deepened through shared challenges. But all of you have shown me what real family looks like. People who lift each other up, who tell hard truths with kindness, who celebrate each other's successes without resentment. My eyes met Richard's briefly. He nodded slightly, acknowledging the gentle reference to our past. Taylor Enterprises was founded on the idea that family business means something special. I still believe that. But I've expanded the definition of family to include all of you who have committed yourselves to our shared vision, who have contributed your talents and energy to making this company what it is today. I raised my glass. So here's to family. The one we choose, the one we build, the one we earn through mutual respect and genuine care. May we continue to grow stronger together. The toast was met with enthusiastic agreement. As conversation resumed around me, I felt a tap on my shoulder. It was Margaret, Richard's longtime assistant, who had first shown me the documents revealing his plan to cut me out of the company. "I have something for you," she said, handing me a small wrapped package. "Walter asked me to give this to you when the time was right. I think that time is now." Inside was a vintage pocket watch and a handwritten note. For Morgan it read, in Walter's familiar scrawl, "Time reveals true character. Yours has always shone brightly. The company is in the right hands now." As I tucked the watch carefully into my pocket, Vanessa approached, champagne flute in hand. "Happy anniversary, CEO," she said with a genuine smile. "You've proven everyone wrong, including me." "Not everyone," I corrected her. "Walter believed in me. Margaret too. And over this past year you've shown that you believed in me too, in your own way." She nodded, a hint of the old pain flickering across her face. "I was so afraid of being outshined by you that I never let myself see how we could both shine in different ways." "Different, but complementary," I agreed. "Your team adores you, you know. You've become the kind of leader they'd follow anywhere." I learned from the best, she replied, then clinked her glass against mine. To sisters, not by blood, but by choice. Later, as dessert was being served, Richard made his way to my side, moving slowly but purposefully. Morgan, he said quietly, I know I haven't said this directly yet, and I should have. I'm sorry. For everything. For making you feel less than. For not seeing your true value. For letting my old-fashioned ideas about legacy blind me to what was right in front of me. I studied his face. Older, now humbled by illness. And by watching his adopted daughter surpass his expectations in every way. Thank you for saying that, I replied. It matters. I've been thinking a lot about that night at Bella Rosa, he continued. About how differently things might have gone if I had stood up for you properly when Vanessa said those terrible things. If I had been the father you deserved. We can't change the past, I said gently. But we've all found a better way forward, haven't we? He nodded, his eyes suspiciously bright. You're a better CEO than I ever was. A better person, too. And I'm proud, so proud, to call you my daughter. If you still want that title, that is. The question hung between us, fragile and hopeful. A year ago I might have grabbed at this olive branch, desperately so hungry for validation that I'd ignore all that had come before. But the woman I was now didn't need his approval to know her worth. Still, forgiveness wasn't just about what he deserved, it was about what would bring me peace. I've always been your daughter, Richard, I said finally. Even when neither of us was very good at remembering that. I think we can do better now. He embraced me then, this man who had rarely shown physical affection throughout my childhood. I returned the hug, feeling not the rush of validation I would once have craved, but something quieter and more sustainable. Acceptance of our flawed but healing relationship. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, I found myself standing with Eleanor, Vanessa, and Richard, the Taylor family, in its new configuration, connected not by obligation or appearances, but by the hard-won understanding that had emerged from our lowest moment. Same time next year, Eleanor asked, a tentative smile on her face. I'd like that, I replied. Same table. All of us. The bill for that dinner at Salvatore's came to just over $4,000, more than the infamous $3,270 from Bella Rosa. But this time it was charged to the company account with the full knowledge and approval of the board. More importantly, this time there was no question about who belonged at the table. We all did. Family by choice, by commitment, by the work we'd done to rebuild what had been broken. As I watched them leave, I thought about the journey we'd taken over the past year. From that moment of utter rejection, you're not really family anyway. Go find another table, to this new understanding of what family truly meant. The path hadn't been easy or straightforward. There had been setbacks and difficult conversations, moments when it would have been easier to walk away entirely. But standing there, I knew with absolute certainty that the family we'd created, imperfect, evolving but genuine, was stronger than the one we'd pretended to be all those years. And that was worth every painful step of the journey. Wow, I can't believe we've reached the end of this story together. I hope you found it as cathartic as I did sharing it. Family relationships can be so complex, especially when adoption and favoritism are involved. I'd love to know if any part of this story resonated with your own experiences with family, karma, or justice. Drop a comment below, and let's continue this conversation. If you enjoyed this journey of family betrayal and redemption, please hit that like button to help others find this story too. And if you haven't already, subscribe to my channel for more real-life stories about complex family dynamics and the path to healing. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that family is about actions, not just blood. Thank you so much for watching until the end. Your support means everything to me. Remember that sometimes the most painful moments in our lives can lead to the most beautiful transformations. Until next time, take care of yourselves and the relationships that truly matter.